I thought I knew how to read people. 63 years of living will do that to you. You start to believe your instincts are sharp enough to catch what your eyes might miss. I was wrong. And the hardest part wasn't finding out I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing how long I'd been wrong, and how close to home it all was. My daughter got married 4 years ago. Her husband, my son-in-law, is a man named Marcus. Tall, well-dressed, always had the right thing to say at the right moment. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order the second time he met you. My wife, Patricia, God rest her soul, she liked him immediately. Said he had good eyes. She always judged people by their eyes. I used to tease her about it. After she passed, 18 months before all of this happened, I thought about that a lot. What she saw in people that I missed. My daughter, Claire, she was happy. That's what mattered to me. She called me every Sunday, came for dinner when she could, brought Marcus along when his schedule allowed. He worked in financial consulting. That's what he told me. Something about portfolio management and client acquisitions. I never pressed for details. I was a shop teacher for 31 years. I understand wood grain and joinery and how to show a 16-year-old that patience produces something beautiful. High finance was never my language, and I didn't pretend otherwise. After Patricia died, Claire worried about me. I knew she did, because she started calling twice a week instead of once, and she'd ask questions like, "Are you eating enough?" and "Have you talked to anyone lately?" meaning a therapist, which I never did, though maybe I should have. The house felt different without Patricia. Not empty exactly. More like a word you said so many times it loses its meaning. I was still there. The furniture was still there, but something essential had gone quiet. Marcus was the one who suggested the security system. He brought it up at Thanksgiving, my first Thanksgiving alone in that house, and he framed it as practical. Said a neighbor 2 streets over had their place broken into. Said an older man living alone was a target. He said it gently, the way he said most things. And Claire nodded along, and I thought, he's looking out for me. That's what I thought. He came over on a Saturday in early March, brought all the equipment in 2 large bags, set everything out on the kitchen table like a surgeon preparing tools. 4 cameras, a central hub, a tablet mounted on a wall bracket that would serve as the main display. He walked me through each component, explained the angles, asked where I felt most exposed. I told him the back door, it faced the alley, and the driveway. He nodded, made notes on his phone. The whole installation took about 4 hours. When he was done, he sat me down at the kitchen table with the tablet and showed me how to access the live feeds, how to pull up recorded footage, how to adjust the motion sensitivity. "You're all set, Dad," he said. He'd started calling me that sometime in the 2nd year of their marriage. I didn't mind. I didn't have a son. It felt like something. He showed me one more screen, the app on my phone that mirrored everything the tablet showed. I could check the cameras from anywhere. He set up my login, chose a password, wrote it down on a notepad by the fridge. I thanked him. He said it was nothing. Claire texted me that evening to ask how it went, and I told her I felt safer already. I meant it. For about 6 weeks, I didn't think about the system much, except to glance at the driveway feed before I left the house in the morning. It did what it was supposed to do. Lights in the backyard triggered when the neighbor's cat wandered through. I caught the mail carrier on camera once, and there was something oddly comforting about that. Just proof that the world was still turning the way it was supposed to. My friend Dennis is the one who changed everything. We went to high school together, lost touch for 20 years, found each other again at a mutual friend's retirement party about a decade ago. Then he spent most of his career in telecommunications, the kind of work that involved network infrastructure and signal routing. Things I never fully understood but always respected. He's the type of man who can walk into a room and immediately start noticing things other people don't. Not in an arrogant way. In the way of someone who was trained to see systems and can't turn that part of himself off. He came over on a Thursday afternoon in late April. We were going to watch a baseball game, eat sandwiches, do what we do. He arrived a little early, and while I was finishing up in the kitchen, he wandered into the living room. When I came in, he was standing in front of the wall-mounted tablet. He hadn't touched it. He was just looking at it. "Where'd you get this setup?" he asked. I told him. My son-in-law installed it. A gift. After Patricia? Dennis nodded slowly. He had his hands in his pockets. He asked me what brand the hub was, and I told him I didn't remember exactly. It was in the kitchen. He followed me there, looked at the hub, turned it slightly to read the label on the back. Then he straightened up and looked at me with an expression I didn't have a name for. Right away. Careful, that was it. He looked careful. Raymond, he said, when's the last time you logged into the admin panel? I told him I didn't know there was an admin panel. Marcus had set up the app on my phone. I used that. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I use your laptop?" We sat at the kitchen table, and he typed in the hub's IP address, something he pulled up from a small card tucked under the hub itself. A login screen appeared. He asked me for the password Marcus had written on the notepad. I got it from the fridge. He typed it in. It didn't work. He tried it twice. Same result. Then he looked at me. "This isn't your admin account," he said. "Someone else set this up under a different login. You have a user account. Whoever installed this has the admin." I sat down. I didn't say anything for a moment because I wasn't sure what there was to say. I knew what he was telling me, but some part of my brain was trying to find an innocent explanation and coming up empty. Dennis kept going, not in a way that felt cruel, but in a way that felt like he understood I needed facts more than I needed comfort. He explained that with admin access, someone could do things a regular user couldn't. They could configure where the footage was stored. They could set up automatic exports. They could, if they wanted, have a copy of everything the cameras recorded sent somewhere other than the hub in my kitchen. "Sent where?" I asked. "Anywhere," he said. "A cloud account, a private server, another device." I looked at the 4 cameras I could see from where I was sitting. The one in the hallway, the one above the back door, the one at the base of the staircase. I thought about 6 weeks of ordinary mornings. Me making coffee, me sitting at the kitchen table with a newspaper, me on the phone, me talking to myself the way you do when you've lived alone long enough that silence starts to feel like a conversation partner. "What would they want with footage of me making eggs?" I said. Dennis looked at me for a moment. "Raymond, what else is in this house?" I understood what he was asking. Patricia and I had been careful people. We didn't trust banks entirely, not after watching our father lose everything in a bad stretch in the 80s. So we kept important documents at home. Not cash, nothing like that. But documents. The deed to the house. Account statements. The paperwork from a life insurance payout, which had been significant. My will, which I'd updated after she died. The name of my attorney, my financial advisor. The account numbers for the investments I'd consolidated after retirement. All of it in a fireproof box in the bedroom closet, which was covered by the camera at the base of the staircase, which pointed directly at the hallway leading to that room. I sat with that for a long time. Dennis didn't push me. He got up, made coffee, he knew where everything was, and set a mug in front of me without being asked. Outside, a lawnmower started up somewhere down the block. The sound of an ordinary afternoon that no longer felt ordinary. "I need to think about this," I said. "I know," he said, "but don't touch the system. Don't change the password. Don't reset anything. If you do, whoever's on the other end knows something changed." That was the hardest instruction I'd ever been given, harder than anything in 31 years of teaching, because it meant going home to my house every day and pretending I didn't know what I knew. It meant looking at those cameras and acting like a man who felt safe. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Gerald, and I've known him for 20 years. He's not the kind of man who reacts visibly to things. You could tell him a meteor was coming, and he'd ask you to be more specific about the trajectory. I told him what Dennis had found. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Don't do anything yet. I'm going to make some calls." 2 days later, Gerald called me back and said he'd spoken to a colleague who handled cases involving financial elder abuse. That phrase, financial elder abuse, landed on me like something physical. I was 63. I didn't think of myself as elderly, but the law, apparently, had its own definitions, and what he was describing fit them. The colleague had a contact at the county sheriff's office who specialized in exactly this kind of case. Gerald arranged a meeting. I drove to an office building downtown on a Tuesday morning, sat across from a woman named Detective Anselm, and told her everything from the beginning. She was younger than I expected, sharp in the way of someone who had learned to ask the right question at the right moment, and then stay quiet long enough to actually hear the answer. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. She asked me twice to clarify certain dates. At the end, she asked me something I wasn't expecting. What's the current value of the estate, roughly? I told her. I saw her write it down without changing her expression. And your son-in-law? Does he have any legal connection to your assets? Power of attorney? Named as a beneficiary anywhere? I said no. Then I stopped. I said, I updated my will after my wife died. Claire is the primary beneficiary. Marcus is listed as secondary in case something happened to Claire before me. Detective Anselm nodded. And does he know that? The answer, of course, was yes. I had told Claire, and Claire would have told her husband, because that's how marriages work. You tell each other things. You trust that the telling is safe. What followed was 3 weeks that I will never be able to fully describe. I went home every evening and lived in that house like nothing had changed. I cooked dinner. I watched television. I took my blood pressure medication at 8 o'clock the way I always did. I sat in the chair by the window and read. And I was aware the whole time of the camera at the base of the stairs, and I made sure my face didn't give me away. It was the loneliest 3 weeks of my life. And that's saying something, because the weeks after Patricia died were very long. Dennis checked in by text every couple of days. He never said anything about the case directly. We'd agreed not to put anything in writing. Just short messages. Checking a game score. Asking if I wanted to grab lunch. Ordinary words that meant he was thinking of me. Gerald called once a week. Detective Anselm called twice. I learned, over those 3 weeks, more about network forensics than I ever expected to know. The sheriff's office had brought in a specialist to examine the system remotely, without touching the hub in my house, without alerting whoever held the admin access. What they found took me a few conversations to fully understand. There was a secondary cloud account connected to the hub. The footage from all 4 cameras was being automatically exported to it every 24 hours. The account was registered to an email address I didn't recognize, but the IP addresses used to access it were traced, with the appropriate legal process, to a device registered in my son-in-law's name. For 3 weeks, every ordinary moment of my life in that house had been delivered to him like a daily report. Detective Anselm also told me something else. In the weeks following the installation of the cameras, there had been a change to a beneficiary designation on one of my retirement accounts. A change I hadn't made, filed through my financial institution's online portal. The login had used my credentials. My username, my password. Credentials that had been written on papers that lived in the fireproof box in my bedroom closet, which the camera at the base of the stairs had a clear view of me accessing. I had walked to that closet, I had taken out papers, I had sat at the kitchen table and reviewed them. And someone had watched and noted and eventually used what they'd seen. The change hadn't fully processed yet. My financial institution's fraud department had flagged it as unusual activity and put a hold on it pending verification. A call they'd been trying to make to me for 2 weeks to a phone number that wasn't mine. That number, traced later, was a second phone registered to Marcus. I sat with all of that information in Gerald's office on a Thursday afternoon. Outside the window, the city went about its business. A bus stopped at the corner. Someone walked by with a coffee cup and a briefcase and the expression of a person thinking about lunch. The world was exactly as ordinary as it always had been, and I was sitting in a chair learning the specific shape of a betrayal that had been built carefully, patiently, in the margins of my grief. I thought about Claire. That was the part I hadn't let myself think about directly until that moment. Whether she knew, whether she'd known all along and this was something they planned together, or whether she was as much in the dark as I had been. I thought about her voice on the phone every Sunday. I thought about how she'd stood next to him at Thanksgiving when he suggested the security system, nodding along like it was the most natural thing in the world. I asked Gerald what came next. He told me. The warrant had been issued. The arrest was scheduled for the following Monday morning. They would pick Marcus up at his office, away from Claire, to minimize the immediate disruption. Gerald had also arranged for someone from the financial institution's fraud team to be available by phone to formally reverse the beneficiary change the moment the warrant was executed. He asked me if I wanted to tell Claire before Monday. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Patricia and what she would have said. Patricia had a way of finding the merciful option in situations that seemed to have none. She would have said Claire deserved to hear it from me, not from a detective at her door. I called Claire on Saturday morning. I asked her to come over alone. She heard something in my voice, I think, because she didn't ask questions. She just said she'd be there by noon. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where Dennis had opened the admin panel, where I'd first understood what was happening. And I told her everything. I told her slowly and as clearly as I could. I watched her face go through something I couldn't name and still can't, because a daughter's face when she learns something like that about the man she married is not a thing you have a word for. She didn't say much for a long time. Then she said, "Dad?" I didn't know. I told her I believed her. I still do. Monday came. The arrest happened the way Gerald said it would. The beneficiary change was reversed by noon. By Tuesday, the sheriff's office had executed a search warrant on Marcus's home office and recovered records indicating he'd been researching my estate and account structure for nearly a year, long before Thanksgiving, long before the security system was ever mentioned. The camera above the back door still works. I had a technician come in and reset the entire system under my own credentials, accounts that only I control. Dennis helped me choose a password this time. I still check the driveway in the mornings before I leave. Claire filed for divorce 2 months later. She comes for dinner on Sundays now, the way she used to before all of this. And sometimes we don't talk about it at all. We talk about other things. Her job. The garden I've been trying to get back into shape since spring. Whether the home team has any hope this season. The ordinary things that make up a life, which turn out to be the most important things there are. I think about what Dennis said the day after he found the admin panel, when we were sitting in my kitchen and I was still trying to understand what I was dealing with. He said, "Raymond, the most dangerous thing about a locked door is believing it's locked because you locked it." I've thought about that almost every day since. I was 63 years old. I had lived in that house for 27 years. I had taught 3 decades of kids to trust the work of their own hands, and I had handed the keys to someone I thought loved my daughter, and by extension, loved me. The system in my hallway records everything clearly now. The feeds go to a cloud account with a password I chose myself, written down nowhere. Memorized the way I once memorized the grain patterns of different woods. Because some things are worth the effort of keeping in your own head, in a place no one else can reach. Patricia had good eyes. She said Marcus had them. I have spent a lot of time wondering what she would have seen eventually if she'd been here longer. I think she would have found it. She always found the thing that mattered. She just would have needed a little more time. I didn't have the luxury of time. I had Dennis and Gerald and a detective with a yellow legal pad and 31 years of learning that the most important skill you can have is knowing when to stop and look carefully at the thing right in front of you. That's what I have now. I look carefully at everything, and I don't apologize for it anymore. I keep coming back to something small. The way Marcus wrote down my password on that notepad by the fridge. How careful he was about it. Made sure I could see it. Made sure I'd feel taken care of. That's the detail I couldn't stop thinking about afterward. Not the cameras. Not the admin account. That little notepad. Because the whole thing was built on the appearance of consideration. And I accepted it because I was grieving, and grief makes you reach toward anything that feels like kindness. What Marcus did had a logic to it, even if the logic was rotten. He watched, he waited, he built a picture. He understood that a man who just lost his wife was softer than usual, more willing to let someone else carry things for a while. He used that. That's not bad luck. That's a choice made deliberately over a long period of time. And choices like that don't stay hidden forever. They leave marks. On records, on accounts, on the memories of everyone who eventually has to sit in an attorney's office and piece together what happened. What Marcus built was a trap, but he forgot that traps require patience from both sides, and I had more time than he counted on. I think about Dennis a lot. He didn't come over that Thursday with any plan. He came for sandwiches and a ball game, but he saw something. And he said something, and he didn't soften it to protect my feelings. That took a kind of honesty that's harder than people realize. It would have been easier to say nothing, to convince himself he was probably wrong, to let me go on feeling safe in a house that wasn't. He didn't do that. He told me the truth because he respected me enough to believe I could handle it. That's what real loyalty looks like. Not comfortable, not easy, but honest. And then there was the 3 weeks of staying quiet, of walking past those cameras every morning and making coffee and reading the paper and acting like a man with nothing on his mind. I won't pretend that was easy. There were nights I sat in that chair by the window and wanted nothing more than to rip the whole system off the wall. But I didn't, because Gerald and Detective Anselm needed time, and I understood that acting on anger in the short term would have cost me everything in the long term. 63 years had taught me at least that much, that the moments when you most want to react are usually the moments that most require you to be still. That's the thing nobody tells you about getting older. It's not that life gets simpler. It's that you finally understand which parts of yourself are worth trusting. I trusted my instincts when Dennis went quiet. I trusted Gerald when he told me to wait. I trusted Detective Anselm's process even when it moved slower than I could stand. And I trusted Claire, not blindly but because I knew her, and because knowing someone for 30 years is different from knowing them for 4. What happened in that house was a consequence. Not fate, not punishment. A consequence. Marcus made a series of choices that treated an old man's grief like an open door. And every door eventually gets closed. Sometimes gently. Sometimes with a warrant attached. I'm not the same man I was before Patricia died. I'm not the same man I was before Patricia died. I'm not the same man I was before all of this either. But I'm still here, and the house is still mine, and the password on the new system lives only in my head. Some things you learn the hard way. Some things you only learn once. That's enough.